Hi guys, welcome to Tuesday, May 12th. We're going to be going over Chapter 11 today, so take out your notes if you want to take notes on that. Those notes might help you on your quiz later, so you don't have to scramble to look through the book while you're taking the quiz. But if not, if you just want a refresher or more in detail about the chapter, just listen in. I'm sure you guys have by now a process of what you do when you watch these videos. If you watch this video, I hope you do. Okay, so Chapter 11, which is all about improving communication climates. And this had a lot of good review and a lot of good comparisons to Chapter 6 and Chapter 4. We didn't read Chapter 4, but it had a lot of good comparisons from that chapter, but a lot of great ones from Chapter 6, which we will reference. Alright, so let's get into this. Communication climate and confirming messages. So first, communication climate. It's just the emotional tone of a relationship. It's whether it's a positive or negative relationship, depending on the tone that we use when we communicate with each other. And then there's levels of message confirmation. Confirming communication and disconfirming communication. Confirming is more positive and it has a lot of praise and encouragement and open communication. Disconfirming communication is more of a lack of regard towards that communication or towards the person you're communicating with. So it's the negative side, really. So the levels of message confirmation continued. These are the types of disconfirming messages. So there's impervious responses. Those are the responses that don't acknowledge the other person's message. They just ignore it completely. Or try to change the subject. But mostly they just ignore that the comment was ever made. Interrupting. While interrupting once in a while isn't really a disconfirming message, when it continuously happens and you're continuously interrupting the speaker's message that they're trying to give to you, that's when it becomes disconfirming. Irrelevant responses is when a comment is made by the listener that's completely unrelated to what the other person just said. So someone's talking about science and you break in and start talking about your great Aunt Tessa. Totally different subject materials, not connected. Then there is the tangential responses, and those are the when the listener uses the speaker's remarks as a starting point for a shift to a different topic. So, like the example says on page 348 to 349, the speaker is talking about going skiing and whether they want to go skiing for a vacation, and the other person's like, yeah, well, I have to pass my botany class or I'm not going to be in the mood to go anywhere, so will you help me do my homework? They use their point and not really answering the speaker's question or commenting on that, other than the fact that they are kind of turning the comment around to focus on their own personal business and their personal life. And then there's the impersonal responses. Those are loaded with cliches and other statements that never truly respond to the speaker. Oh, I'm having a really rough time, says the speaker. And then the listener is like, well, we all have tough times sometime. Yeah, 'tis life. And doesn't really comment on the people who are sharing that emotion with you and trying to seek help or advice from you. And then there's the ambiguous responses, which contain messages with more than one meaning. So kind of like you're not really sure. Once the speaker says something like, hey, you want to hang out later? The other person's like, oh, well, maybe. Not giving an answer yes or no. It's ambiguous. You're not really, you end the conversation not really sure what you're going to be doing. And then there's the incongruous responses, which contains two messages that seem to deny or contradict each other. One message is usually nonverbal, which involves tone or body language. So the first speaker's like, oh, I love you, honey. And then the other one's like, yep, love you too. Tone is totally off, not as excited, not as intimate, not as sincere. So two messages that are being transmitted back to the speaker that don't really work together. They're not congruent. They're incongruous. All right. So then you go into the disagreeing messages, which really talks in to messages which are saying you're wrong. The listener or the second speaker is saying back to the main speaker, you're wrong in some way or another. So this can be in either aggressiveness, which is an attack on the self-concepts of other people in order to inflict psychological pain. And this is different from argumentativeness because aggressiveness involves bullying and name-calling and just really low-blow attacks. Nothing that has anything to do with facts or things that are necessary to say. It's just trying to kick someone when they're down. And then there's the complaining. It's a register of dissatisfaction without being prepared to argue. And there could be differences of this. There could be kind of positive or negative. A satisfied or a satisfactory relationship, a good positive relationship. Complaining can be used to offer more complaints about behavior that you wish that the other person in the relationship would adjust just to make you a little happier or to make things more congruent, if you will, more positive. Whereas unsatisfied couples, whether romantic or non-romantic, aim at personal attacks. So the you language versus the I language in a way. So you're a slob, you're horrible, you're mean. And then there's the argumentativeness, which is presenting and defending positions on issues while attacking positions taken by others. A lot of times lawyers use this talk, but it's all based around facts. So, well, you said this, but this is the actual fact. This is actually what happened, and here's my proof. Argumenting, which is totally different, like I said, from aggressiveness, which has no basis on facts and is just used to be mean, pretty much. And then there's the confirming messages. There's recognition. So the listener or the second speaker recognizes the main speaker's message. I recognize that you messaged me, I message you back. I recognize that you text me, I text you back. Because remember how we talked in the beginning, how someone's not sending a text back to a reply or taking forever to send a text back can also be a message in itself. Like, yeah, I really don't want to talk about this, or, oh, I'm ignoring you because I don't really want to talk to you. And I'm trying to avoid talking to you. And then there's acknowledgement. Acknowledging the ideas and feelings of the other person, of the speaker, listening, and active listening, not just, that's great, but active listening. Just even if you don't agree with it, you're listening, you're being active, you're communicating with them, you're acknowledging their emotions and their ideas. Endorsement is a step up from acknowledgement, where not only are you actively listening, but you're also agreeing with what others are feeling and what others are saying. You're agreeing with their ideas. So how communication climates develop? First, there's the self-perpetuating spiral. And that goes on, that's a reciprocating communication pattern in which each person's message reinforces the other. So a back and forth, a positive back and forth communication. And then there's two types. There's escalatory conflict spiral and de-escalatory conflict spiral. Escalatory conflict spiral is most visible that that disconfirming messages, those negative messages, reinforce one another. One attack leads to another attack, which leads to another, and it just turns into a blowout fight. And then there's de-escalatory conflict spirals. Parties slowly lessen their dependence on each other, withdraw, and become less invested in the relationship. So a de-escalatory conflict spiral could actually be more negative than an escalatory conflict spiral, because at least if you're fighting, you might have come up with a resolution eventually because you're both still intent on this relationship working. So you're fighting about it in order to kind of reach a resolution at one point. Once you get to this de-escalatory conflict spiral, you both start not really caring about saving this relationship, whether it's a friendship, romantic, whatever. Once you stop fighting, you kind of stop looking for a solution as well, and the relationship falls apart. Okay. Again, this is me not saying that fighting is a good thing, but escalatory and de-escalatory is saying this relationship is over. Escalatory means, hey, I'm still fighting to find a solution usually. Okay, so defensiveness, causes and remedies for it. Okay, so there's phrase-threatening acts where those are messages that seem to challenge the image that we want to project. So obviously we are likely to resist these messages because, just as we've discussed in previous chapters, our personal self-concept is something that we don't really like to change that often, and when we're kind of being forced to change, we are like, not in my comfort zone, please don't do this. So you try to ignore those messages. And then we get into preventing defensiveness in others, which is when we get into the Gibb categories from, what was his name, Jack Gibb, who created this theory around 6 types of defense-arousing communication and 6 contrasting behaviors that lessen the level of threat and defensiveness. So you'll see that table on page 357 that has defensive behaviors and then their opposite supportive behaviors. And then we obviously have the versus the comparison summaries between the two. So first is evaluation versus description. So evaluation goes into the you language we discussed in chapter 6. You are lazy, you don't listen. Description focuses on the speaker's thoughts and feelings. So turning that you language into I language, as we did in that activity for chapter 6. So instead of saying you're a slob, you're saying I get a little frustrated when you leave your clothes scattered around the house all the time. So you language turned to I language. Evaluation versus description. And then there's the control versus problem orientation. So controlling communication is when a sender seems to be imposing a solution on the receiver with little regard for the receiver's needs or interests. You're forcing your opinion on them. You're forcing a solution on them when sometimes they just want you to listen. And then problem orientation, the opposite of that, focuses on finding a solution that satisfies both their needs and those of the others involved. So instead of forcing, this is my way or the highway sort of thing, it's saying, okay, how can we work this out together? How can we both get what we want? And then there's the next one, strategy versus spontaneity. Strategy is defense-arousing messages in which speakers hide their ulterior motives, dishonesty, manipulation, trying to get what they want without fully saying what their main intention is. As spontaneity is the opposite, being honest with the others rather than manipulating them. Straightforward talking. This doesn't mean blurting out whatever you mean and whatever your truth is. It's going straight for it. Instead of avoiding the point or beating around the bush, you're, okay, I need your help unpacking this, unpacking the boxes this weekend. Instead of, hey, what are you doing this weekend? Do you have any plans? You're going straight forward to the point, and saying what you actually want with them, from them. All right, and then there's the neutrality. Oh, actually, this video is about to end, so stay tuned for part 2 of the video.